we've reached the stage now where you can see the relatively simple process of adding fluid grid divs so that we can add content to areas on the page that we define. What I've done here is tidy up the div IDs by making them a bit more suitable for where they're positioned. I've still got our top div called header, as you can see, and you can also see it down here, but I've renamed the two div IDs on this row. I've called this first one Content Left, and of course the div on the right I've called Content Right. And finally the one running along the bottom here is our footer div. Right, what I want to do is I want to add some text to all these divs, and then once I've added some text I'm going to style it. We'll start off with our header. And what I've done is I've already created some simple HTML documents that I've typed some random text into. So if I come over to my Files panel and then open up my Content folder, well, inside here you can see these 4 HTML documents, Content 1 and 2, and Footer and Header. I'll double click on my header text to open this. Now I've only done it like this to save your time rather than you watching me type it all in. Anyway, I've got this text, so I'm going to highlight it all so I can copy it. I'll right click and run down here to copy. OK, now I don't need this file open any longer, so I'll click on the cross to close it. And so now, with my header, I can come across to my code view and making sure I'm looking at my header div ID, then I'll delete the text, the placeholder text, first by highlighting it and then using Ctrl+V to paste in what we've just copied from the other document. And I'll click on our refresh button down here. So now by coming back over to the design view, I want to add some content to our content left area. So once more by coming over to my files panel, I'm going to open up content number 1 HTML here. And with all this text, I'm going to highlight it first of all, so I can right click and copy, and then close it down. And then making sure I'm in this content left div, I can highlight the text here, should I want to, or I could go back to my code view. I find it easier to work in the code view. And in fact, you'll notice in my code view, which is one of the reasons why I do like working in code view, you can see that even though I thought I'd highlighted all that text, I haven't. Regardless, it's easy enough to get rid of that. I'm going to use Ctrl+V to paste in the copied text, and then I'll simply come up here and delete that T, and then I'll click on refresh once more. I'll pop back to my design view, and then this time by coming back over here, I'm going to select this document, Content 2. Now there is a lot of text here. If I don't want to bring it all in, then of course I don't need to. I would just simply select the amount of text that I do want to use. So I'll grab this part and right click and run down to copy. I'll close the document, and by making sure I'm in my Content 2 div, I'll come back over to code view, and because I highlighted the text accurately in our last step, I can simply Ctrl+V to paste in this text. And I'll refresh once more and go back to design. Incidentally, if you've not got a lot of text that you want to add into a div, then you don't need to copy it from another document. You can simply just delete what's here. In our footer, for example, I'm going to remove this junk text, this dummy text, and then simply type in contact, and then add in a fictitious telephone number. And I suppose at this point I should come up to File, and then run down to Save All. Okay, so that's our content added. Now of course you could go through and add much more text, or add some photographs or whatever you want to add, but I'm just making this as simple a process as possible so you can see how this is done. For example, if I want to style my header text, well, by making sure it's selected, if I come down to the Properties panel and click on HTML, then I can now come down to my Format area. Clicking on here opens our pre-formatted headers. I want this to be heading 1, so I'll select heading 1. And immediately my header text takes on the heading 1 tag. Now if I want to take this a step further with my content left, for example, then I can make sure I'm selecting in it, first of all, and then come down to CSS on my Properties panel, and I could go through and change some CSS from here. However, you'll find it much easier by coming over to your CSS panels and then coming down to the relevant div. And I'm going to find the relevant div here in my fluid CSS file. So there it is, content left. Double clicking here opens up my CSS rule definitions. So now I can go through and style as necessary. For example, with my font, by clicking on font family, well of course I can choose from any of these fonts. I'm going to choose this one and apply it. Now if I come to my background category, I can choose a background colour just for this div. Now I probably wouldn't do this in reality, but I want to show you how easy it is to set things up like this. So by clicking on my background colour, well, I'm going to choose a fairly pale colour. Maybe this one here, this sort of pinky colour, this very faint pink. And apply it. And then perhaps by coming down to the box category, I can add some padding. Maybe I want to add 5 pixels of padding all round, and then by hitting apply, well, that has applied it, of course. And if I OK this, well, you'll see it's been added. Or if you subsequently change your mind, well, come back over to your CSS Styles panel and open up the relevant div, this one, and then by going back to box, well, perhaps I only want some padding at the top and at the bottom, so I'll make it 5 at the top, 0 for left and right, and 5 at the bottom, and apply that. Now that actually doesn't look enough for me, so let me just go back up and change my top padding to 15 and the bottom padding to 15 as well, and I'll come down and click on apply, and I'll OK it. Right, that looks better to my eyes. And of course what I would do is I would do the same thing for my content right area. Now just to save you some time, by the magic of editing, I'm going to pause this screen recording whilst I do this, and I'll come back once it's done.